Picture this, the 1960s, a decade of iconic cars and groundbreaking designs. But hidden among the legends were some serious flops. Cars so bad it's hard to believe they were even made. We've put together a list of 13 of the dumbest and worst cars of the era. Bizarre designs, constant breakdowns, and pure automotive disasters. Ready to be shocked by the worst rides of the 60s? You won't believe these existed. The Opal Cadet A, produced between 1962 and 1965, was introduced as Opel's response to the growing demand for budget-friendly compact cars in post-war Europe. Targeted at a wide range of buyers, from families to first-time car owners, the Cadet A aimed to provide a practical and economical vehicle that could handle the everyday needs of its drivers. However, while it succeeded in being affordable, it fell short in several key areas, making it a rather forgettable entry in the automotive landscape of the 1960s. At first glance, the Cadet A had a very utilitarian appearance. Its boxy, simple design lacked the flair or elegance seen in many European cars of the time. Unlike its more stylish counterparts from manufacturers like Fiat, Renault, or even Volkswagen, the Cadet A's aesthetics were minimalistic, which reflected its primary function: affordability over form. For many, it appeared uninspired, as if the designers were more focused on meeting cost and production quotas rather than crafting a visually appealing car. While this approach made sense in a market where affordability was key, it did little to capture the imagination of consumers who were beginning to look for more than just practical transportation. Under the hood, the Opel Cadet A was powered by a small, underwhelming engine. The base model came with a 1.0-liter, four-cylinder engine that produced around 40 horsepower. While this was sufficient for urban driving and basic commuting, it quickly became apparent that the Cadet A struggled when faced with anything more demanding. Whether it was accelerating to highway speeds or climbing a modest incline, the car's lack of power was noticeable and often frustrating for drivers. The engine's limited output, combined with the car's lightweight build, meant that performance was far from exciting. The driving experience in the Cadet A was not much to rave about either. The car's suspension was rudimentary, resulting in a rough and bumpy ride, especially on uneven roads. Many drivers found the handling to be unrefined, with the car feeling unstable at higher speeds. The small engine didn't provide much torque, which left drivers with a sluggish response when they needed to accelerate or overtake. The steering was also on the vague side, contributing to an overall driving experience that lacked precision or any sense of engagement. It was clear that the Cadet A was designed with cost-saving measures in mind rather than engineering excellence. Inside, the Cadet A was just as Spartan as its exterior suggested. The interior materials were basic, with hard plastics and minimal padding used throughout the cabin. Seats were functional but lacked comfort, making longer trips less than ideal. The dashboard was straightforward, with basic dials and controls, but there was little in the way of modern conveniences. The lack of amenities, such as a proper heating system or sound insulation, made the cabin feel noisy and bare-bones. This minimalist approach did little to distinguish the Cadet A from its competitors, many of whom were beginning to introduce more comfortable and feature-rich interiors, even in their budget models. One of the car's few redeeming qualities was its practicality. The Cadet A was compact enough to be nimble in city traffic, and its size made parking in tight spaces relatively easy. It also offered decent trunk space for a car of its size, making it a useful option for small families or individuals who needed an affordable vehicle for daily tasks. However, this practicality was undermined by the car's lack of refinement in almost every other area. The lack of innovation in the Cadet A was particularly noticeable when compared to other compact cars from the same era. European competitors like the Renault 4 or the Volkswagen Beetle had already established themselves with distinctive designs and innovative engineering solutions. The Cadet A, on the other hand, seemed to be playing catch-up without offering anything new or exciting. Its boxy shape, lackluster performance, and minimal features made it a far cry from the bolder designs emerging from competitors. Despite these shortcomings, the Opel Cadet A managed to find a place in the market. largely due to its affordability. In the early 1960s, many consumers were still recovering from the economic challenges of the post-war era, and there was a significant demand for simple, cheap transportation. The Renault Dauphinoise, produced from 1956 to 1960, was the station wagon variant of the Renault Dauphine, a car that had already earned a reputation for being underwhelming. While the Dauphine was designed to be an affordable, small family car, the Dauphinoise was meant to add practicality in the form of more cargo space, catering to families or small businesses needing a versatile vehicle. However, despite the addition of this increased storage capacity, the Dauphinoise carried over many of the flaws from its base model, making it a far from ideal option for anyone in need of reliable transportation. One of the most immediate drawbacks of the Renault Dauphinoise was its engine. Like the Dauphine, it was powered by a small 845 cubic centimeter rear-mounted engine that produced a meager 30 horsepower. This lack of power severely hampered the car's performance. Acceleration was sluggish, and the Dauphinoise struggled to reach even moderate highway speeds, let alone maintain them. With a top speed of just about 60 miles per hour, the car was poorly suited for long-distance travel or fast-paced city traffic, where quick acceleration or nimble maneuvering was often required. The weak engine, combined with the added weight of the wagon body, made the Dauphinoise even slower and more lethargic than its sedan counterpart. The handling of the Dauphinoise was another area where it fell short. The rear engine layout, while innovative at the time, created balance issues that made the car difficult to control in certain conditions. The light front end caused poor steering response, and the car was prone to oversteer, particularly in wet or slippery conditions. This made driving the Dauphinoise an often unpleasant experience, especially for those unaccustomed to the quirks of its handling. Given its utilitarian design and station wagon format, the expectation was that the Dauphinoise would offer stability and reliability for family outings or carrying goods, but it frequently failed to live up to that promise. Another major issue with the Dauphinoise was its build quality. Like the Dauphine, it was plagued by rust problems. The body panels were not well protected against corrosion, and in many parts of Europe, where wet or salty road conditions were common, the car would begin to show signs of rust within just a few years of use. Rust was particularly troublesome around the wheel arches, floor panels, and door sills, areas that were crucial to the car's structural integrity. In an era when many families were looking for durable vehicles that could withstand the elements, the Dauphinoise quickly gained a reputation for being unreliable and short-lived. The mechanical reliability of the Dauphinoise was also problematic. Frequent breakdowns were a common complaint, with engine overheating, clutch failures, and electrical issues topping the list of concerns. Owners often found themselves needing to repair or replace key components far earlier than expected, making the car's low initial purchase price less of a bargain in the long run. These mechanical failures only added to the car's already poor reputation, and many buyers regretted choosing the Dauphinoise as their family or business vehicle. Inside, the Dauphinoise was just as basic as the sedan version of the Dauphine. The interior was Spartan, with few amenities to make driving more comfortable. The seats were simple and offered little in the way of padding or support, making long drives uncomfortable for passengers. The dashboard featured a minimal layout, with basic instrumentation and controls that felt cheap and outdated even for the time. In a market where even budget cars were starting to offer more in terms of creature comforts, the Dauphinoise's bare-bones interior did little to impress. While the Renault Dauphinoise did offer one key advantage in terms of cargo space, with its larger rear compartment making it more practical than the standard Dauphine, this extra space was not enough to overcome the car's many deficiencies. The added utility of the station wagon format was overshadowed by the weak engine, poor handling, and frequent mechanical issues. Even for those who needed a budget-friendly vehicle with a bit more storage capacity, the Dauphinoise was often more trouble than it was worth. Overall, the Renault Dauphinoise is remembered as a disappointing and flawed vehicle that failed to deliver on the basic needs of its intended buyers. While it was marketed as an affordable and practical family car or small business vehicle, its combination of slow performance, poor build quality, and unreliable mechanics made it a regrettable choice for many. Today, the Doofen W is mostly forgotten, overshadowed by more successful models from Renault and other manufacturers that offered far better value and dependability. The Dodge Lancer, produced from 1961 to 1962, was Dodge's attempt to break into the growing compact car market in the early 1960s. During this time, American automakers were responding to consumer demand for smaller, more economical vehicles that could compete with the likes of European imports and emerging domestic models like the Ford Falcon and Chevrolet Corvair. However, despite Dodge's ambitions, the Lancer failed to make a lasting impact, largely due to its uninspired design, mediocre performance, and the fierce competition it faced from other automakers. One of the primary drawbacks of the Dodge Lancer was its bland and forgettable appearance. The car was designed to be a practical, no-frills, compact vehicle, but this practicality came at the cost of style and visual appeal. The Lancer had a boxy, unremarkable shape that lacked the sleek lines or distinctive features that might have set it apart from the competition. Although it featured modest tail fins, a hallmark of American car design at the time, these fins felt outdated and out of place on a vehicle meant to symbolize the new era of compact, efficient cars. The Lancer's exterior did little to attract attention, and its conservative design choices made it easy to overlook in a crowded market. Under the hood, the Dodge Lancer was similarly underwhelming. The base model came with a 170 cubic inch 2.8-liter slant-6 engine that produced around 101 horsepower, which was adequate but far from exciting. This engine offered decent fuel economy for the time, but it was not particularly powerful or responsive, leaving drivers with a lackluster driving experience. For those looking for more power, there was an optional 225 cubic inch 3.7-liter slant-6 engine that delivered 145 horsepower. But even this larger engine didn't transform the Lancer into a performance-oriented vehicle. Acceleration was sluggish, and the car struggled to offer the kind of spirited driving experience that many consumers were beginning to expect, especially as competitors like the Ford Falcon and Chevrolet Corvair offered more engaging handling and driving dynamics. The Lancer's handling was another area where it fell short. While the car's compact size made it more maneuverable than larger sedans, its suspension system was not particularly advanced, and the overall ride quality left much to be desired. The car felt stiff and unrefined on rough roads, and its steering was not as responsive as that of its competitors. The lack of innovation in the Lancer's handling meant that it didn't offer much in the way of driving enjoyment, which was a key factor in the growing popularity of compact cars at the time. Consumers wanted small cars that were fun to drive, but the Lancer's unremarkable performance and handling failed to deliver on that front. Inside, the Dodge Lancer was equally uninspiring. The interior was basic and utilitarian, with few features or luxuries to speak of. The dashboard was simple and functional, but it lacked the modern design touches that were beginning to appear in other cars of the era. The seats were relatively comfortable, but the overall cabin space was cramped, especially for passengers in the rear. While the Lancer was marketed as an affordable compact car, its interior did little to enhance the driving experience, and it lacked the kind of creature comforts that might have made it more appealing to buyers looking for both practicality and comfort. One of the biggest challenges facing the Dodge Lancer was the intense competition in the compact car market. The Ford Falcon, which was introduced around the same time, quickly became a bestseller thanks to its stylish design, solid performance, and reputation for reliability. Similarly, the Chevrolet Corvair offered a more innovative, rear-engine layout that appealed to consumers looking for something different. Both of these cars overshadowed the Lancer, which struggled to differentiate itself in a market that was rapidly evolving. Without any standout features or innovations, the Lancer quickly fell behind its rivals, and sales were disappointing as a result. In its 2 short years of production, the Dodge Lancer failed to make a significant mark on the automotive landscape. It was ultimately replaced by the Dodge Dart in 1963, a car that proved to be far more successful and long-lasting. The Dart offered better performance, improved styling, and a wider range of options, allowing Dodge to finally compete more effectively in the compact car segment. In hindsight, The Dodge Lancer is often remembered as a missed opportunity for Dodge to capitalize on the growing compact car trend of the early 1960s. While it was an affordable option, its uninspired design, lackluster engine performance, and mediocre handling left it trailing behind its competitors. The Hillman Husky, produced between 1954 and 1965, was intended as an affordable and practical station wagon for British families. Yet it failed to inspire much enthusiasm among drivers. As a small, no-frills vehicle, it aimed to provide basic transportation for people on a budget. But its shortcomings in terms of performance, design, and comfort made it more of a workhorse than a car to enjoy. It served its purpose but offered little else, making it a utilitarian option rather than a vehicle people took pride in owning. One of the biggest drawbacks of the Hillman Husky was its sluggish performance. Under the hood, early models were powered by a 1.2-liter four-cylinder engine that produced just 35 horsepower, which was hardly enough to provide anything more than basic mobility. Later models saw improvements with a 1.4-liter engine, but even this upgrade didn't make the Husky a lively car. Acceleration was slow, and the car struggled to keep up with modern traffic, particularly when fully loaded with passengers or cargo. Its top speed was modest at best, meaning it wasn't ideal for long trips or highway driving. This lack of power made the Husky feel outdated, even during its production years. The handling of the Hillman Husky was also far from engaging. Built on a chassis designed for simplicity and cost-effectiveness, the car offered little in the way of refinement. The ride was stiff and bumpy, particularly on rough roads, and its steering felt heavy and unresponsive. Driving the Husky was more of a chore than a pleasure, as it was far from the nimble, easy-to-handle small cars that were becoming more popular at the time. The suspension system, designed to be durable, contributed to the overall sense that the Husky was built for utility, not for driving enjoyment. In terms of design, the Hillman Husky didn't stand out either. Its boxy, utilitarian shape was functional, but far from stylish. The car's square lines and plain features gave it a dated appearance, even in the 1950s and 60s, when car designs were becoming more sleek and modern. There was little attempt to add any flair or excitement to the Husky's exterior, making it a vehicle chosen for necessity rather than aesthetic appeal. While station wagons generally prioritize practicality over style, the Husky's design felt particularly uninspired. It was the kind of car that blended into the background, unlikely to turn heads or spark interest. Inside the Husky, things were similarly basic. The interior was designed for practicality and durability, not comfort or luxury. The seats were simple and lacked support, especially for long drives, and the cabin was small, leaving little room for rear passengers to stretch out. The rear cargo area was spacious for a vehicle of its size, and this was one of the car's few redeeming qualities, making it suitable for families who needed to transport luggage, groceries, or other items. However, the overall interior experience was Spartan, with minimal creature comforts. Buyers looking for a more refined or enjoyable driving experience were likely disappointed by the Husky's bare-bones approach. Where the Hillman Husky did excel, however, was in its practicality. Its compact size made it easy to navigate through tight city streets, and the wagon layout offered a decent amount of cargo space for small families or those who needed to carry a fair amount of luggage or goods. It was a functional car that could get the job done, but it lacked the refinement, comfort, or performance that might have made it more desirable. The Hillman Husky's appeal was largely based on its affordability, and for many families, that was its main selling point. It was a budget-friendly option for those who needed a reliable vehicle, but didn't have the means to invest in something more powerful or stylish. Unfortunately, this focus on cost-cutting meant that the Husky fell short in nearly every other category. It was dependable but dull, reliable but slow, and practical but far from exciting. By the time the Hillman Husky was discontinued in 1965, it had been eclipsed by more modern, better-performing small station wagons and compact cars. Its utilitarian nature had served a purpose, but as consumers began to expect more from their cars in terms of both design and driving experience, the Husky's shortcomings became all the more apparent. Today, the Hillman Husky is largely remembered as a basic, workmanlike car that served its purpose without ever leaving a lasting impression. For those who owned one, the Husky was often a car that got the job done, but few would have looked back on it with any great affection or nostalgia. It was in many ways the epitome of an everyday car, reliable and practical, but without any of the qualities that make a car special or memorable. The Mercury Comet, produced from 1960 to 1963, was intended to be a budget-friendly entry into the compact car market. Positioned as a more affordable option within the Mercury lineup, the Comet aimed to attract buyers seeking a practical and economical vehicle. However, it quickly became apparent that the Comet had significant drawbacks that undermined its potential appeal. One of the primary criticisms of the early Mercury Comet was its uninspired design. While it featured a simple, classic compact shape, the styling lacked the flair and character that many competitors were offering at the time. The exterior was characterized by clean lines and a modest profile, which, while functional, failed to excite or attract attention on the road. In an era when automotive styling was beginning to take bold leaps forward, the Comet's design felt outdated and bland, making it hard to stand out in a crowded market. Buyers looking for something that expressed individuality or style were often left disappointed. Performance-wise, the Comet was equally underwhelming. Initially, the car was offered with a modest inline-six engine that produced only around 90 horsepower, which was barely adequate for a vehicle trying to compete in the increasingly competitive compact segment. Though an optional V8 was available, many buyers stuck with the base engine, which resulted in sluggish acceleration and uninspiring performance. The Comet struggled to make its mark as a sporty compact, and its lack of power meant that it could not compete with more dynamic rivals like the Ford Falcon or Chevrolet Nova. Handling was another area where the Comet fell short. The car was built on a platform that prioritized cost-effectiveness over performance, resulting in a suspension system that did not offer much in terms of ride comfort or handling precision. Many drivers reported that the Comet felt clumsy and imprecise on the road, particularly when navigating corners or uneven surfaces. This lack of driving dynamics diminished the overall experience, making the Comet feel like a chore to drive rather than a vehicle to enjoy. Quality control issues also plagued the early Mercury Comet models. Buyers frequently reported problems ranging from interior fit and finish to mechanical reliability. These concerns contributed to a perception that the Comet was a cheap, poorly made vehicle rather than a reliable compact option. As a result, many owners found themselves grappling with frequent repairs and maintenance, further diminishing their overall satisfaction with the car. Although the Mercury Comet was relatively affordable compared to other models in the market, its shortcomings in design, performance, and quality made it a forgettable entry in the compact car segment. It failed to capture the imagination of buyers, and many turned to competitors that offered more engaging driving experiences and greater reliability. In retrospect, the early Mercury Comet is often remembered as an emblem of the struggle that many automakers faced during a time of significant change in the automotive industry. It represented an attempt to cater to a new generation of buyers seeking compact cars, but ultimately fell short of delivering on its promises. Today, it serves as a reminder of the importance of blending affordability with quality and performance to create a truly appealing vehicle. The Comet's legacy is largely overshadowed by more successful models of the era, leaving it as a footnote in the history of American compact cars. The Willies Jeepster, produced from 1948 to 1950, stands as a fascinating yet ultimately flawed chapter in automotive history. This unique vehicle was an ambitious endeavor by Willys Overland, aiming to leverage the rugged and adventurous reputation of the Jeep brand while venturing into the realm of sporty passenger vehicles. The Jeepster was marketed as a stylish and versatile option, hoping to attract consumers who desired a blend of practicality, open-air driving, and light off-road capability. However, despite its innovative concept and quirky charm, the Jeepster struggled to make a significant impact, becoming an obscure model soon after its release. The design of the Willies Jeepster was one of its most distinctive features. It featured a convertible top, which appealed to those who enjoyed leisurely drives with the wind in their hair. The quirky aesthetics were characterized by a high, rounded hood, sweeping fenders, and a unique front grille that attempted to blend the rugged look of traditional Jeeps with a more casual, sporty flair. The Jeepster was available in various vibrant colors, which were intended to emphasize its playful nature. However, the overall styling failed to resonate with many consumers, leading to mixed reviews. The design was often seen as an awkward combination of ruggedness and fanciness that left potential buyers unsure about the vehicle's identity. Under the hood, the Jeepster was powered by a modest four-cylinder engine that produced only about 75 horsepower. This power output was far from impressive, especially considering the competitive landscape of the late 1940s and early 1950s. The engine's performance was sluggish, making the Jeepster feel underpowered, especially when fully loaded with passengers or cargo. The car's top speed and acceleration left much to be desired, resulting in a driving experience that many found disappointing. The Jeepster was intended to be a fun and spirited vehicle, but its lack of power made it feel more like a chore to drive than a pleasure. Handling was another significant drawback for the Jeepster. Its suspension system, originally designed for off-road capability, did not provide the refined driving experience expected in a passenger car. The vehicle was heavy, which contributed to its sluggishness and resulted in a bumpy ride, particularly on uneven surfaces. The Jeepster lacked the nimbleness and responsiveness that characterized its competitors, and this deficiency in handling further alienated potential buyers seeking a fun and dynamic driving experience. While the Jeepster aimed to combine elements of utility and leisure, it fell short in the off-road department as well. Despite its heritage as a Jeep, known for its rugged off-road prowess, the Jeepster was not built for serious off-road adventures. It lacked the robust four-wheel drive systems and ground clearance typically associated with the Jeep brand, making it ill-suited for tackling challenging terrains. This disconnect left consumers confused about the vehicle's intended purpose. Many buyers expected a Jeep that could handle the outdoors, but instead found a car that was more suited for city driving and light excursions. The Jeepster's production ran from 1948 until 1950, during which time it struggled to carve out a niche in a competitive automotive market. Its unique styling did attract a small group of enthusiasts who appreciated its quirky nature and open-top design. But this small following was not enough to sustain the model in the long term. Sales dwindled rapidly, and by 1950, Willies Overland discontinued the Jeepster due to its inability to compete effectively against more refined and powerful vehicles. In retrospect, the Willies Jeepster is a testament to the challenges of combining rugged utility with passenger comfort and style. Its ambitious attempt to bridge two distinct segments of the automotive market ultimately resulted in a vehicle that lacked the necessary qualities to thrive. Today, the Jeepster is often remembered as an intriguing curiosity rather than a significant automotive achievement. For collectors and enthusiasts, it represents a unique blend of post-war automotive innovation and a cautionary tale about the complexities of market positioning. While it may have faded into obscurity, the Jeepster's legacy as a quirky and unconventional vehicle endures, reminding us of a time when manufacturers were willing to take risks in pursuit of something different. The Ford Popular 103E, produced from 1953 to 1959, is a classic example of post-war British motoring that sought to offer affordable and practical transportation to the masses. While marketed as a budget-friendly vehicle, the Popular 103E quickly became associated with outdated design and underwhelming performance, making it a car often viewed with a mix of nostalgia and disappointment. At first glance, the Ford Popular 103E's design reveals its roots in an earlier era of automotive styling. The exterior features a boxy silhouette that harks back to the pre-war period, lacking the sleek lines and modern curves emerging in the automotive industry during the 1950s. Its front end is characterized by rounded fenders, a flat grille, and simplistic headlight placement that, while functional, does little to excite the senses. In a market increasingly influenced by design innovations and aesthetic appeal, the Popular 103E's retro look felt more like an anachronism than a contemporary choice. For many consumers, the dated styling was a significant drawback, as potential buyers began to gravitate towards vehicles offering transportation and a sense of style and modernity. Competing models from other manufacturers showcased more innovative designs, making the popular 103E appear stagnant by comparison. The car's lack of visual appeal contributed to its reputation as a basic, no-frills vehicle that many would prefer to overlook in favor of more attractive options. Under the hood, the Ford popular 103E was powered by a modest 1.2-liter side-valve engine that produced a mere 30 horsepower. This engine was a remnant of an earlier design, and its performance was notably lackluster, leading to a driving experience that could only be described as sluggish. The car struggled to reach even moderate speeds, which proved problematic in an era when road speeds were beginning to rise, and drivers sought cars that could keep up with the demands of modern traffic. Acceleration was often slow, and many drivers found that merging onto highways or navigating busy intersections required considerable caution. The popular 103E's performance limitations made it challenging to maneuver effectively in various driving conditions, particularly in urban environments where quick responses were often necessary. This underpowered engine significantly affected the overall driving experience, leaving many to lament the lack of power and excitement typically associated with driving. The car's engineering extended to its suspension and handling, which were outdated even when the vehicle was first released. The suspension system was basic and lacked the sophistication seen in more modern competitors, resulting in a ride that was often harsh and uncomfortable. Drivers frequently reported that the car struggled to absorb road imperfections, leading to a bumpy experience that made longer journeys feel laborious. The handling was similarly disappointing, with vague steering and a lack of feedback that made it difficult for drivers to feel connected to the road. This contributed to a sense of instability, particularly at higher speeds or during cornering maneuvers. Inside the Ford popular 103E, the focus on affordability was evident. The interior design was stark and functional, reflecting the car's utilitarian purpose. The cabin featured minimal amenities, and the materials used were basic and lacked the quality and comfort that were beginning to define higher-end models. While the dashboard was straightforward, it provided little in the way of driver engagement or visual appeal. Space within the car was also limited, making it less than ideal for families or those needing to transport multiple passengers. The seats were basic and lacked the comfort features many consumers were beginning to expect, such as cushioning or adjustability. As a result, longer trips could become uncomfortable, and passengers often found themselves cramped within the confines of the car's small interior. Despite its numerous shortcomings, the Ford popular 103E served a purpose as a low-cost transportation option for many British families during the 1950s. It filled a niche in the market for those who needed basic mobility without the added cost associated with more luxurious models. However, as consumer expectations evolved and the desire for more powerful, stylish, and comfortable vehicles grew, the popular 103E struggled to remain relevant. By the late 1950s, the automotive landscape was changing rapidly, with manufacturers introducing cars that prioritize comfort, design, and performance. As a result, the popular 103E began to fade into the background, overshadowed by competitors that offered more appealing options. Many owners of the popular 103E found themselves regretting their purchase, often wishing for a more modern vehicle that could better meet their needs. The Checker Marathon, produced from 1961 to 1982, became an iconic vehicle primarily associated with its role as a taxicab in bustling cities like New York. While its utilitarian design and durability made it a workhorse in the commercial sector, it was far from a popular choice for personal use. Those who did purchase it for everyday driving found themselves with a vehicle that, while tough and long-lasting, offered little in the way of comfort, style, or driving enjoyment. At first glance, the Checker Marathon's design immediately reflects its functional purpose. The boxy exterior, large proportions, and minimalistic styling are all hallmarks of a vehicle built to prioritize practicality over aesthetics. Unlike the sleek curves and modern designs emerging from other manufacturers during the 1960s and 1970s, the Marathon stood as a stark contrast. Its simplicity made it easily recognizable on city streets. But for private owners, this lack of visual appeal was one of the car's main drawbacks. The car's exterior was essentially a no-nonsense approach to design, with wide, flat panels, large bumpers, and oversized fenders. It lacked the chrome detailing or sweeping lines that were common on many of the era's more popular sedans. In a world where cars were increasingly viewed as extensions of personal taste and style, the Marathon's appearance did little to inspire a sense of excitement or pride. It was a car that looked utilitarian, which was acceptable for taxis, but not for the everyday consumer seeking a sense of ownership beyond sheer practicality. Under the hood, the Checker Marathon was equipped with various engines over the years, ranging from inline sixes to V8s, but even the larger engines didn't translate into impressive performance. The car was notoriously sluggish, especially considering its hefty curb weight. This made it well-suited for stop-and-go city traffic, where high speeds weren't necessary, but on highways or more open roads, the Marathon's performance was far from thrilling. The heavy chassis and weight of the Marathon also affected its handling, which was often described as clumsy or cumbersome. The suspension was designed to withstand the rigors of constant use in urban environments, so comfort and smooth handling were secondary concerns. This led to a stiff ride that absorbed bumps well enough for short city trips, but became increasingly uncomfortable during longer journeys. The steering was also far from precise, making the car feel disconnected from the road, which was another drawback for those hoping to use the Marathon as a family or personal vehicle. The interior of the Checker Marathon was just as utilitarian as its exterior. Inside, the focus was on durability and ease of maintenance rather than comfort or luxury. The seats were covered in basic materials that were chosen for their longevity rather than their softness or style. Hard plastics, minimal padding, and a simple, almost Spartan dashboard layout made the car feel more like a tool than a cozy place to spend time. While this was perfectly adequate for taxi drivers who prioritize function over form, it left personal buyers feeling underwhelmed. There was, however, one aspect of the Marathon's interior that worked in its favor: space. The car's large dimensions translated into an incredibly roomy cabin, with plenty of legroom and headroom for passengers, both in the front and rear seats. This made it ideal as a taxi or even as a family vehicle for those who valued space above all else. In fact, the Marathon's reputation for spaciousness was one of the few redeeming qualities for private owners who appreciated the roominess it offered, even if it lacked comfort or refinement. Durability was the one area where the Checker Marathon truly excelled. The car was built to last, and many taxis remained in service for years or even decades, thanks to the solid construction and easily replaceable parts. This made the Marathon a reliable option for commercial use, where constant wear and tear were expected. However, for private owners, this durability came at the expense of other qualities that typically made a car desirable for personal use, such as performance, comfort, or style. In the end, the Checker Marathon was a vehicle that served a very specific purpose and did so well. As a taxi, it was dependable, spacious, and long-lasting, able to withstand the rigors of daily city driving. However, as a personal vehicle, it was far from appealing. Private buyers found that the Marathon's utilitarian nature, sluggish performance, and lack of refinement left much to be desired. While it may have been an iconic sight on city streets, those who chose to own one for themselves quickly realized that the Marathon was a car best suited for work rather than pleasure. The Austin A90 Atlantic, produced between 1949 and 1952, was a bold but ultimately flawed attempt by the British carmaker Austin to break into the lucrative American market. The post-war era saw a booming demand for cars in the US, and British manufacturers like Austin hoped to take advantage of this by offering a vehicle that would appeal to American tastes. Unfortunately, the A90 Atlantic failed to deliver on its promises, and its shortcomings became all too apparent to both critics and consumers. At first glance, the Austin A90 Atlantic was an unusual mix of British sensibilities and American aspirations. Its design was clearly aimed at mimicking the flashier, more extravagant styles that were popular in the US during the late 1940s and early 1950s. The car featured large chrome bumpers, a wide front grille, and a curvaceous body, giving it a bulbous, almost overdone appearance. While it was intended to look sleek and modern, the design ended up being somewhat awkward and ungainly, failing to capture the streamlined elegance of American cars like those from Buick or Chevrolet. The Atlantic's styling seemed confused, caught between the restrained British design ethos and the bolder, more aggressive lines that defined American cars of the era. The Atlantic was powered by a 2.6-liter inline-4 engine, which, while reasonable by British standards, was underwhelming in the American market, where larger V8 engines were quickly becoming the norm. With only about 88 horsepower, the A90 Atlantic struggled to deliver the kind of performance that American buyers expected from a car being marketed as sporty and stylish. The car's heavy body further hampered its ability to provide a truly dynamic driving experience. Acceleration was slow, and the handling was unremarkable, making it clear that the Atlantic was not a sports car by any stretch of the imagination. Despite being marketed as a vehicle that could combine British craftsmanship with American flair, the Austin A90 Atlantic was plagued by mechanical problems that further tarnished its reputation. The engine was prone to overheating, and other issues like poor build quality and unreliable electrical components caused frustration for owners. These mechanical failures added to the car's already limited appeal, as potential buyers quickly realized that it was neither reliable nor powerful enough to meet their needs. The interior of the Atlantic, much like its exterior, was a mix of contradictions. While it was designed to offer comfort with leather upholstery and a wood-trimmed dashboard, the overall feel was still somewhat cheap and dated compared to the more luxurious interiors found in American cars. Space was adequate, but the driving experience inside the cabin felt less refined than what one might expect from a car being marketed as both sporty and elegant. The lack of advanced features or modern conveniences, combined with the outdated design, made it difficult for the Atlantic to compete with more sophisticated American sedans and coupes. Sales of the Austin A90 Atlantic were disappointing, both in the US and in its home market of Britain. The car's odd design, weak performance, and mechanical issues made it a hard sell, and it failed to capture the imaginations of American buyers in the way Austin had hoped. By the early 1950s, production was halted, and the Atlantic faded into relative obscurity, remembered more for its ambition than for any real success. While the A90 Atlantic may have had some appeal as an affordable car with unique styling, it never managed to live up to its marketing as a sporty, stylish vehicle. Its failure to resonate with buyers on either side of the Atlantic reflected a deeper issue with Austin's attempt to appeal to two very different markets with a single, flawed product. Today, the Austin A90 Atlantic is viewed as a curious footnote in automotive history, a car that aimed high but ultimately fell short, symbolizing the difficulties of trying to bridge the gap between British engineering and American tastes. The Renault Caravel, produced from 1958 to 1968, was Renault's attempt to offer a stylish, sporty convertible that could compete with other European roadsters of the time. Positioned as a glamorous, affordable car for the masses, the Caravel was designed to be both a fashionable and fun-to-drive vehicle. However, despite its promising looks and initial appeal, the car ultimately failed to live up to expectations due to its lackluster performance and reliability issues. The Caravel was introduced in an era when small European sports cars were gaining popularity, especially among young drivers. Its sleek, elegant design, with smooth lines and a convertible top, made it visually appealing. The car's exterior, styled by the Italian design house Carrozzeria Gaga, gave it a polished, upscale appearance, which made it stand out in Renault's more practical and utilitarian lineup. Its design echoed the look of other successful convertibles of the time, such as the Volkswagen Carmen Ghia and Fiat 850 Spider, giving the impression that it was built for spirited driving along sunny coastlines. However, beneath the stylish exterior, the Caravel's performance was far from sporty. The car was powered by a small 845 cubic centimeter, four-cylinder engine that produced just 40 horsepower in its early versions. Later models upgraded to a 956 cubic centimeter or a 1,108 cubic centimeter engine. But even these revisions didn't provide the kind of power that buyers were expecting from a car marketed as a sporty roadster. Acceleration was sluggish, and with a top speed that barely reached 80 miles per hour, the Caravel struggled to deliver any kind of excitement on the road. The car's weight further compounded its issues, as the relatively heavy body didn't help its already strained engine. One of the major disappointments with the Renault Caravel was its handling. While it had the looks of a sports car, its driving dynamics were much more in line with a basic economy car. The steering felt unresponsive, and the suspension didn't offer the firm, agile handling that was typical of true sports cars. Instead, it provided a soft, comfortable ride, which was more suitable for leisurely cruising than for any kind of spirited driving. Buyers who were hoping for a nimble, fun-to-drive convertible were left wanting more. The car also suffered from mechanical and reliability issues. Renault used components from the Renault Doofen, which was already notorious for its lack of reliability, and as a result, the Caravel inherited many of the same problems. Frequent engine troubles, electrical issues, and rust problems plagued owners, leading to frustration and costly repairs. For a car that was supposed to offer carefree driving enjoyment, these reliability concerns were a significant drawback. Although the Caravel had its share of shortcomings, it wasn't entirely without merit. Its design, particularly the convertible version, made it a head-turner, and it appealed to those who valued style over performance. It was also relatively affordable for a convertible, which attracted buyers who wanted the look and feel of a luxury roadster without the high price tag. The car's spacious interior and decent comfort levels made it suitable for everyday driving, and its small engine meant that it was economical to run, especially in the fuel-conscious, post-war years. Still, as time went on, it became clear that the Renault Caravel was more about form than function. Buyers who wanted performance, speed, or precision handling quickly realized that the Caravel couldn't deliver on any of those fronts. While it sold reasonably well in Europe, particularly in France, its appeal didn't last, and it was soon overshadowed by more capable and exciting cars like the MGB or Alfa Romeo Spider. Even within Renault's lineup, the Caravel was eventually phased out as newer models came along. In the end, the Renault Caravel became a symbol of missed potential. Its chic, Italian-inspired design hinted at something much more exciting than it turned out to be, and its underwhelming performance left many buyers disappointed. Today, it is remembered more for its style than its substance, a car that looked the part but couldn't quite live up to its sporty image. Despite this, it still holds a certain charm for collectors and enthusiasts who appreciate its classic 1960s styling and its role in Renault's history as an ambitious, if flawed, attempt at producing a European convertible for the masses. The Glas Gaga, produced by Hans Glas GmbH from 1955 to 1969, was one of the earliest microcars designed to provide affordable transportation in post-war Germany. Its diminutive size and low cost made it accessible to many, particularly in a time when larger, more expensive vehicles were out of reach for much of the population. However, the Gaga Mobile's small stature, weak engine, and overall lack of comfort limited its practicality, and while it served its purpose as an entry-level vehicle, it was far from an enjoyable or versatile car to own. Measuring less than 10 feet in length, the Gaga Mobile was designed to fit into the category of microcars that were popular in the 1950s and 1960s, a class of vehicles that bridged the gap between motorcycles and full-size cars. Its tiny, rounded body featured a two-door configuration, and it was available in several versions, including a sedan, the T300 and T400, a coupe, and a small van. The compact dimensions made it ideal for navigating narrow city streets and tight parking spaces, which was a necessity in many European cities at the time. The Gaga Mobile was powered by a modest two-stroke engine, with early models featuring either a 250cc or 300cc engine that produced just 13 horsepower. Later models offered a slightly larger 400cc engine, but even then, power output only increased to around 20 horsepower. As a result, the car's performance was extremely limited. The Gaga Mobile struggled to reach speeds over 50 miles per hour, and its acceleration was slow, making it unsuitable for highway driving or any situation that required more than basic city travel. The tiny engine, paired with a manual 4-speed gearbox, meant that drivers had to work hard just to maintain momentum, and any kind of incline could seriously hinder the car's already feeble power. Inside, the Gaga Mobile was as minimalistic as the exterior suggested. The interior space was cramped, with room for only 2 adults in the front and a small, often uncomfortable rear bench, that could fit 2 children or very small adults. The cabin offered few amenities, and creature comforts were essentially non-existent. The car was designed to be as light and simple as possible, so there were no luxuries like air conditioning, a radio, or even proper insulation. This lack of refinement made the Gaga Mobile noisy, with the loud drone of its 2-stroke engine filling the cabin on every drive. Handling was also a challenge for the Gaga Mobile. Its tiny wheels, narrow track, and short wheelbase made it susceptible to instability, especially at higher speeds or when encountering rough roads. The suspension was basic and did little to smooth out bumps, so the ride was often uncomfortable, particularly on anything but the flattest roads. The lightweight construction, while contributing to its fuel efficiency and maneuverability, also meant that the car could feel flimsy, and in adverse weather conditions, it struggled to maintain stability. Strong winds or wet roads could easily unsettle the Gaga Mobile, making it a risky proposition for anything other than short urban trips. Despite its drawbacks, the Gaga Mobile found a market, particularly among those who needed cheap, no-frills transportation. Its low price made it appealing to individuals and families who couldn't afford a larger car, and it was often seen as an alternative to scooters or motorcycles, offering more protection from the elements. The fuel efficiency was another selling point, as the small engine consumed very little gasoline, which was important during the economic recovery period when fuel prices were still a concern for many Europeans. Over the course of its production run, more than 280,000 Gaga Mobiles were built, making it a relatively successful car in terms of sales. However, as the 1960s progressed, improvements in automotive technology and increasing consumer expectations began to render the Gaga Mobile obsolete. Larger, more comfortable cars became more affordable, and the limitations of microcars like the Gaga Mobile became increasingly apparent. The car's Spartan interior, weak performance, and lack of versatility meant that it was quickly outclassed by more modern vehicles. Today, the glass Gaga Mobile is remembered primarily as a quirky piece of automotive history, emblematic of a time when microcars were a viable solution for a population recovering from the economic hardships of war. While it was far from an ideal car in terms of performance or comfort, it represented a significant step in making personal transportation accessible to a wider audience. For collectors and enthusiasts, the Gaga Mobile holds a certain charm, its unique design and historical significance outweighing its many practical shortcomings. However, for the average driver during its heyday, the Gaga Mobile was more a compromise than a car to be cherished, useful for short trips around town, but not something one would choose for comfort or long-term reliability. The Citroen Bou, produced between 1959 and 1964, was an ambitious but ultimately unsuccessful attempt by Citroen to cater to the British market with a unique, budget-friendly car. Based on the popular 2CV, which was beloved for its simplicity and rugged charm, the Bou aimed to offer a more stylish alternative by featuring a fiberglass body and a design that was supposed to be more appealing to the British consumer. However, despite its best intentions, the Bou failed to live up to expectations and was plagued by several significant issues that doomed it to commercial failure. One of the key problems with the Citroen Bou was its performance, or lack thereof. While the 2CV was known for its minimalist design and low-powered engine, it was also extremely lightweight, which allowed it to make the most of its modest power. The Bou, however, featured a heavier fiberglass body, and this extra weight severely hampered its performance. Powered by the same tiny 425 cubic centimeter, air-cooled, two-cylinder engine found in the 2CV, the Bou struggled to keep up with even the slowest traffic, and its top speed barely exceeded 45 miles per hour. Acceleration was painfully slow, and any sort of incline or hill became a major obstacle for the car, as the engine was simply not up to the task of moving the heavier body with any sense of urgency. In addition to its sluggish performance, the Citroen Bou was also criticized for its design. Unlike the quirky and functional look of the 2CV, the Bou attempted to adopt a more elegant, streamlined appearance, but the result was far from attractive. The fiberglass body, while innovative in theory, gave the car an awkward, bulbous shape that didn't sit well with consumers. The design was neither modern nor classic and failed to appeal to buyers looking for something more stylish than the 2CV. The Bijou's attempt to bridge the gap between Citroen's rustic charm and British tastes ultimately missed the mark, as the car ended up looking neither refined nor particularly utilitarian. Handling was another area where the Citroen Bijou struggled. The car's suspension was based on the same basic design as the 2CV, which was famous for its ability to traverse rough terrain with ease. But the added weight of the Bijou's bodywork meant that the suspension felt less compliant. The car had a tendency to wallow through corners, and its narrow tires and high center of gravity made it feel unstable at higher speeds. Though higher speeds in the Bijou's case were still relatively slow compared to most other cars on the road. The result was a driving experience that was far from enjoyable, especially when compared to some of the more nimble and responsive small cars of the era. Inside, the Citroen Bijou was as Spartan as its exterior was uninspiring. The interior was simple to the point of being uncomfortable, with very few amenities or creature comforts. The seating was basic, and the dashboard was minimalist, offering only the bare essentials in terms of instrumentation. While this no-frills approach may have been acceptable in a car like the 2CV, which was designed to be practical above all else, the Bijou's heavier and slower nature meant that it didn't even have the rugged charm or practical advantages that made the 2CV so beloved. Instead, it felt like a compromise in almost every aspect, a car that was neither particularly fun to drive nor very comfortable to ride in. As a result of these various shortcomings, the Citroen Bijou was a commercial disaster. Despite Citroen's hopes of selling the car as an affordable alternative to other small British vehicles, the Bijou's combination of poor performance, unattractive design, and lackluster handling made it an extremely hard sell. Production was halted in 1964 after only about 200 units had been made, making the Bijou one of Citroen's rarest and most forgettable models. In retrospect, the Citroen Bijou stands as an interesting but misguided experiment in automotive design. It attempted to offer something unique by combining Citroen's engineering with a more market-specific design, but the result was a car that failed to capture the spirit of either the 2CV or the British small car market. Today, the Bijou is mostly remembered as a curious footnote in Citroen's history, an example of how good intentions and innovative ideas can sometimes lead to lackluster results. While its rarity has made it something of a collector's item in recent years, few would argue that the Bijou was ever a success in its original form. The Ford Consul Classic, produced from 1961 to 1963, was one of Ford's more daring attempts to bring a distinctively styled, affordable family car to the British market. At the time, the automotive industry was seeing a shift, with manufacturers eager to offer more stylish and modern vehicles for the growing middle class. While Ford had high hopes for the Consul Classic, the model ended up being more remembered for its quirks and flaws than for its success. Though its appearance aimed to be futuristic, the car was soon criticized for its odd design choices and underperforming engine, both of which contributed to its downfall. One of the most noticeable and debated aspects of the Ford Consul Classic was its unique styling. The car sported an unusual backward-slanted rear window, which was not only an aesthetic oddity, but also impractical in some respects. This design feature, intended to set the Consul Classic apart from the more conservatively styled cars of the era, ended up being polarizing. While a few buyers appreciated the bold approach, many felt it was simply awkward and out of place. The window, combined with large rear fins, created a profile that made the car look bulkier than it actually was. The rear styling seemed at odds with the front, which had a more subdued, though still boxy design. This visual dissonance made the car less appealing to a market that was beginning to value streamlined, cohesive designs. In terms of performance, the Consul Classic was underwhelming. Equipped with a 1.5-liter four-cylinder engine, the car struggled to provide sufficient power, especially when compared to other vehicles in its class. The engine, though adequate for city driving, felt anemic when pushed on highways or during overtaking maneuvers. Drivers often complained that the car was sluggish, and its acceleration was lackluster at best. The underpowered nature of the engine made driving the Consul Classic a frustrating experience for those who sought a more dynamic performance. With an uninspired top speed and slow acceleration, the car could not compete with some of the more energetic rivals of the time. Beyond the engine, the console Classic was also criticized for its poor handling. The car's suspension was rudimentary, and cornering could feel uneasy, especially at higher speeds. The steering was often described as vague, with little feedback from the road, adding to the disconnect between driver and machine. Many found the car's overall ride quality to be subpar, with bumps and uneven surfaces transmitting harshly into the cabin. It simply did not have the refined driving dynamics that were becoming more common in vehicles of the era. Moreover, the braking system was not as responsive as one might expect, which raised concerns about safety for those who drove the car regularly. Compounding these performance issues were the reliability problems that began to surface not long after the car hit the market. The console Classic quickly gained a reputation for being mechanically troublesome. Electrical failures were a common complaint, with owners frequently reporting issues with the car's lights, ignition system, and other essential components. In an era where automotive reliability was becoming increasingly important to consumers, these kinds of problems were enough to turn many potential buyers away. Brake failures, engine overheating, and other mechanical issues added to the car's growing list of shortcomings. Repair costs could pile up quickly, making the console Classic less attractive as a budget-friendly option in the long term. Inside, the Ford console Classic didn't offer much to make up for its exterior and performance flaws. The interior was basic, even by the standards of the time. While Ford intended the car to be a practical family vehicle, the cabin was sparse and utilitarian, lacking the comfort and convenience features that were becoming more common in cars of the same class. The dashboard was plain, with minimal instrumentation, giving the driver little more than the essentials. Comfort was another area where the console Classic fell short. The seating, though adequate for short trips, was not particularly well cushioned, and passengers often found long journeys to be uncomfortable. The rear seats, while providing decent space for a compact car, didn't do much to improve the overall experience. The console Classic's lack of refinement was apparent in almost every area. Noise insulation was poor, meaning that the engine, road, and wind noise were easily audible inside the cabin. These cars represent the less glamorous side of the 1950s and 1960s automotive industry. While they were affordable and accessible, they also came with significant compromises in quality, performance, and style. Many of these models were quickly forgotten or were remembered for all the wrong reasons, often becoming symbols of automotive disappointment.